Part 5. The Answer. The observation deck was empty at 0400 hours. Hyunwoo stood at the window and watched the station rotate against the dying star. In 2 days, they would leave this system forever. The archive would remain, preserved and protected, but ultimately alone again, unless he could figure out the right words. Can't sleep either? Ji-won's voice came from behind him. She moved quietly, settling into the chair nearest the window. I keep hearing them. The prayers, especially that mother, the one who lost her child. Fragment 12,406, Hyunwoo said automatically. He had memorized so many of the fragment numbers that they came to him like old friends. Have you written the message yet? I've started it 20 times. Every version feels wrong. He turned to face her. How do you answer 800 years of silence? What words could possibly be enough? Ji-won was quiet for a moment. She was Christian, Hyunwoo knew, though she rarely talked about it. She wore a small silver cross that she touched now, almost unconsciously. Maybe you're overthinking it. Prayers don't need complicated answers. They need to be heard, to be acknowledged. Sometimes that's all anyone wants. But what if the acknowledgement comes too late? What if it doesn't matter anymore? Does it have to matter to them? Maybe it matters to us. Maybe it matters to whoever finds this archive next. She smiled sadly. My grandmother used to say that every prayer changes the person who prays. Not because God answers, but because the act of hoping transforms you. Maybe that's true for listening too. Hyunwoo sat beside her. I'm scared I'll get it wrong, then get it wrong honestly. That's better than not trying at all. Over the next day, Hyunwoo worked with an unexpected group of helpers. Daiho helped with the technical aspects, figuring out how to use the station's ancient transmitters to broadcast across multiple frequencies. Ji-won refined the message structure, ensuring it could be understood by any species that might eventually intercept it. And then Kyungmin arrived. He was the ship's chaplain, a role most survey vessels didn't have, but the human crews had insisted, and Kyungmin served all faiths equally. He was older, with kind eyes and steady hands. He had heard about Hyunwoo's project and volunteered his help. I'm not sure how helpful I can be, Kyungmin said when they met in Hyunwoo's lab. I serve the living, not the dead. But you understand prayer. You understand what people need when they're desperate. Kyungmin listened to several of the fragments. He sat with his eyes closed, his face peaceful, and when the recordings ended, he opened his eyes with tears in them. They're beautiful and heartbreaking. Help me write something that honors them. They worked together through the afternoon. Kyungmin brought a perspective that Hyunwoo lacked. He understood the rhythm of sacred language, the balance between reverence and honesty. They wrote and rewrote, tested phrases against the original Kethrin prayers, ensured the translation would maintain meaning across languages. By evening, they had a draft. Taejin reviewed it in his quarters, reading slowly, his lips moving slightly as he processed each word. Finally, he looked up. It's good, but it's missing something. You're speaking to the dead. You should also speak to the living. What do you mean? This archive won't stay secret forever. Eventually, other species will come here. Other explorers, other scholars. Your message should speak to them too. Should explain what you found and what you did. Hyunwoo revised the message again. This time he added a preamble. An explanation of who had found the archive, when, and why they chose to respond. The final version read, To the Kethrin who prayed, and to all who come after, we found your prayers. 40,000 voices preserved across 800 years of silence. We listened to everyone. We heard your hopes, your fears, your desperate pleas to gods who never answered. We cannot undo your suffering. We cannot bring back those you lost. We cannot answer your prayers the way you hoped they would be answered. But we can tell you this. You were heard. Your voices reached across time and found us. Your faith, even as it broke, mattered. Your prayers, even unanswered, were not meaningless. You asked if anyone was listening. We answer, yes, we are here. We heard you. You asked if you were alone. We answer, no, you are remembered. You are witnessed. You are not forgotten. To all who come after us, who find this archive and these prayers, listen. Bear witness. Remember that once, a people believed in something greater than themselves. Remember that they hoped even when hope seemed foolish. Remember that they prayed even when prayers went unanswered. And know that the act of listening, of caring, of remembering, this is sacred. This is how we honor the dead. This is how we answer prayers that can never be answered. You were not alone. "You are not alone. You will never be alone again." Kyungmin read it and wept. Taijin approved it without changes. Velnara gave her grudging permission to proceed. On the final day before departure, the team gathered on the station. They stood in the archive chamber surrounded by 40,000 glowing crystals and prepared for the broadcast. Daiho had worked miracles with the ancient transmitters. "I've linked them to the station's main power core. The signal will be strong enough to reach several light years in all directions. It'll broadcast on all major communication frequencies, plus some ancient Kethran wavelengths. If anyone's listening, they'll hear it." "How long will it broadcast?" Velnara asked. "As long as the station has power. Could be centuries." Hyunwoo stood at the central terminal, his hand hovering over the activation control. Jiwon had prepared the message in both Galactic Standard and Old Kethran. The translation wasn't perfect, but it was honest. That mattered more. "Wait," Kyungmin said. He moved to stand beside Hyunwoo. "If we're going to answer prayers, we should do it properly." "May I?" "Of course." Kyungmin closed his eyes and spoke softly. The words were a blessing. Non-denominational. Carefully crafted to honor all faiths and none. He blessed the Kethran who had prayed. He blessed their hopes and their heartbreak. He blessed the archive itself, this strange temple of unanswered prayers. When he finished, the chamber felt different. Quieter somehow, more sacred. Hyunwoo activated the broadcast. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the crystals began to pulse in synchronization, their light growing brighter. The message transmitted outward, carried by electromagnetic waves and ancient Kethran technology, spreading into the void. The original prayers went with it. Hyunwoo had included them, the full unedited recordings, so that anyone who heard the response would also hear what they were responding to. The voices of the Kethran, preserved and shared, their prayers finally receiving an answer. The archive sang. That's what it sounded like to Hyunwoo. All 40,000 fragments resonated together, creating harmonics that shouldn't have been possible, and the chamber filled with the sound of 800 years of faith finding acknowledgement. Velnara's mandibles trembled. "I didn't expect that." "Neither did I," Hyunwoo whispered. They stood in silence as the broadcast continued. The message would repeat every hour, indefinitely, a constant response to constant prayer, and perhaps somewhere, somehow, the Kethran would know they had been heard. That night, aboard the ship, Diho found Hyunwoo in the observation lounge again. "You did it. We did it. Fair enough. How do you feel?" Hyunwoo considered the question. "I feel like I did what I was supposed to do. Like I was meant to find that archive. To hear those prayers. To answer them. That sounds religious. Maybe it is," Daeho smiled. "My grandmother would have liked you." They sat together and watched the station grow smaller as the ship pulled away. The broadcast continued, invisible but present, filling the space around the station with acknowledgement, with witness, with something that might be called love. Jiwon joined them, then Soyeon, then even Kyungmin. The humans gathered in silence, watching the station disappear into the darkness. "What do you think will happen now?" Jiwon asked. "I don't know," Hyunwoo admitted. "Maybe nothing. Maybe the broadcast will continue for centuries and no one will ever hear it. Maybe it doesn't matter. We heard the prayers. We answered. That's enough." But even as he said it, Hyunwoo didn't quite believe it. Something had changed in that chamber. When they activated the broadcast, something had shifted in the universe. The prayers had been answered, and that meant something. It had to mean something. Velnara's voice came over the ship's intercom. "All crew prepare for jump to hyperspace. Next destination, the Outer Rim surveys." The ship shuddered as the engines engaged. The stars stretched into lines of light. And behind them, in the darkness of the Outer Veil sector, 40,000 prayers continued their eternal broadcast, finally answered by those who had chosen to listen. Hyunwoo closed his eyes and hoped that somewhere, in whatever existed beyond death, the Kethran knew they had been heard. That their faith, broken as it was, had finally received its answer, not from gods, but from something perhaps just as important, from others who cared enough to listen. Part 4. The question. The debate had been going for 2 hours, and Hyunwoo's patience was wearing thin. The conference room felt stuffy despite the environmental controls maintaining perfect temperature. Around the table, representatives from different departments argued about the fate of 40,000 prayers. "We should transport the entire archive to the Galactic Museum," argued Kolthar. "It has historical value. Future scholars should have access." Dismantling it would damage the crystalline structure, Deho countered. The prayers are encoded in the arrangement itself. Move them and we might lose data. Then we catalog everything digitally and leave the physical structure, Velnara suggested. Standard procedure for fragile artifacts. Hyunwoo stood abruptly. They're not artifacts. They're prayers. From real people who lived and died hoping someone would hear them. They're audio files, Velnara said, not unkindly. 800 years old. The people who made them are dust. That doesn't make them less important, it makes them less urgent. The door opened, interrupting the argument. A human man in ethics officer uniform entered, his movements careful and deliberate. Taejin was older than most of the crew, with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of difficult decisions. He had transferred to the survey ship only 3 days ago, sent specifically to review the archive discovery. Sorry I'm late, he said, taking a seat. I needed time to review Hyunwoo's documentation. All 300 translated prayers plus his cultural analysis. He looked at Hyunwoo. Impressive work. And deeply troubling. Troubling how? Velnara asked. Because it raises questions we're not equipped to answer. What are our ethical obligations to the dead? What rights do prayers have? If a prayer goes unanswered for 8 centuries, does it expire? Or does it wait forever for someone to acknowledge it? The room fell quiet. These were questions that pure logic couldn't answer. Questions that required something the aliens had mostly abandoned. Philosophical thinking about the sacred. With respect, Thovak said, these are abstract concerns. We need practical decisions. The survey ship moves to the next sector in 4 days. Do we take the archive, leave it, or destroy it? Destroy it? Ji-won spoke for the first time, her voice sharp. Why would we destroy it? To prevent cultural contamination. If word spreads about this archive, dozens of species will claim religious connections to the Kethrin. It could cause disputes, even violence. Taejin shook his head. Cultural preservation laws forbid destroying religious sites, even abandoned ones. The archive stays intact. The question is, what do we do with it? Hyunwoo had been thinking about this for days. He had an idea, but he knew it was radical, probably against regulations, possibly career-ending. But every time he closed his eyes, he heard those voices. The mother of the Silver Temple. The angry philosopher. The last priest sealing the archive with trembling hands. I need to make a call, he said suddenly. Personal matter. I'll be back in 20 minutes. Velnara looked like she wanted to object, but Taejin nodded. Take your time. This decision shouldn't be rushed. Hyunwoo fled to his quarters and activated the long-range communication terminal. The delay to Earth was 17 minutes one way, which meant a real-time conversation was impossible. But he didn't need a conversation. He needed to hear his sister's voice. Yoonji, it's me, he said to the recorder. I know it's been months since we talked. I know you're probably angry I missed your birthday again, but I need to tell you about something I found. He explained the archive, the prayers, the desperate hope of a dying civilization. He explained how he had listened to 40,000 voices crying out to gods who never answered. And then he told her what he was thinking of doing. Remember when I was 8? When I had that infection and the doctors weren't sure I'd make it? You were only 5, so maybe you don't remember. But Mom does. She told me years later that she prayed every night. Not to any specific god, really. She was Buddhist, but she prayed to Buddha, to Jesus, to anyone who might be listening. She said she didn't care who answered as long as someone did. Hyunwoo's voice cracked slightly. I got better. The antibiotics worked. Or maybe the prayers worked, or maybe it was just luck. But Mom believes the prayers helped. Not because they magically cured me, but because they gave her strength to keep hoping, to keep believing I'd be okay. He paused, gathering his thoughts. These Kethrin prayers went unanswered for 800 years. But I heard them, and I keep thinking, what if that's enough? What if being heard is its own kind of answer? He ended the message and sent it. Then he sat in the darkness of his quarters and waited for his heart to stop racing. The door chimed. Daeho entered without waiting for permission.
You okay?
I'm thinking about breaking protocol. His friend sat on the edge of the bunk. Want to tell me about it? What if we answered the prayers? We're not gods, Hyunwoo. I know. But we're here. We found them. We listened. What if we sent a message back? Not to the Kethrin, obviously. They're gone. But into space. A response to those 40,000 prayers. An acknowledgement that they were heard. Daeho was quiet for a long time. That's not scientific. It's not logical. It wouldn't accomplish anything practical. No, Velnara would never approve. I know. It would probably violate half a dozen regulations about tampering with historical sites. I know. Daeho smiled slightly. So when do we do it? Hyunwoo looked at his friend in surprise. You'd help? My grandmother used to drag me to church every Sunday. I hated it. Thought it was all superstitious nonsense. But after she died, I found her prayer journal. 40 years of prayers written in her shaky handwriting. Prayers for her family, for her health, for world peace, for my grades in school. He laughed softly. I read every one. And I wished I could tell her I heard them. That they mattered. So you understand? I understand. They returned to the conference room together. The debate had devolved into circular arguments about practical concerns versus ethical obligations. Hyunwoo took his seat and waited for a break in the conversation. I have a proposal, he said finally. Velnara's mandibles clicked. We're listening. We leave the archive intact. We establish it as a protected cultural site. But before we leave, we acknowledge what we found. We send a message into space, a response to the prayers. Nothing elaborate. Just a simple statement that they were heard. That's ridiculous, Thovak said. Who would receive this message? No one, everyone. That's not the point. The point is that these people spent their last years hoping someone would listen. And we did. We should tell them that. They're dead, Koltar said flatly. Yes, but their prayers aren't. The prayers are still here, still waiting. And we have the ability to answer. Not with miracles. Not with divine intervention. Just with acknowledgement. With witness, Taejin leaned forward. Continue. The Kithran built this archive to preserve their prayers. They kept it powered across 8 centuries of abandonment. That's not an accident. They wanted someone to find it. Someone to care. We're that someone. And if we just catalog the data and fly away, we've failed them. We've heard their prayers and chosen not to respond. You're being emotional, Velnara said. But there was something different in her voice now. Uncertainty, perhaps. Yes, I am. Because these prayers demand an emotional response. They're not data to be analyzed. They're souls crying out. And we have a choice. We can treat them like historical artifacts, or we can treat them like what they are. Intimate, sacred expressions of hope. Soyeon spoke up. From a psychological perspective, Hyunwoo's proposal has merit. The act of witnessing suffering, of acknowledging pain, has healing power. Not for the Kethran, obviously, but for us, for any species that might find this archive in the future. It establishes a principle that prayers matter, that faith matters, that hope matters even when it goes unanswered. You're all insane, Thovak muttered, but he didn't argue further. Taejin looked at Velnara. Captain, this is your decision, but I recommend we consider Hyunwoo's proposal seriously. The ethical implications of ignoring these prayers are significant. Velnara was silent for a long moment. Her alien features were unreadable, but Hyunwoo had learned to recognize her thinking posture. Finally she spoke. 3 days. You have 3 days to prepare your response message. I want it reviewed by Taejin before transmission. And it must not interfere with our other survey objectives. After that, we leave the system. Thank you, Captain. Don't thank me yet. If this backfires, if it causes some kind of galactic incident, I'm putting the blame entirely on you. I understand. That night, Hyunwoo couldn't sleep again. But this time, it wasn't from grief or frustration. It was from something else. Something that felt like purpose. He was going to answer 40,000 prayers. And somehow, that felt like the most important thing he'd ever done. Part 3. The translation. The conference room felt too small for what Hyunwoo needed to say. Velnara sat at the head of the table, her forearms folded in a posture that Hyunwoo had learned meant impatience. The other alien crew members occupied the remaining seats, their various forms creating a strange tableau of different evolutionary paths. Daeho and Jiwon flanked Hyunwoo on either side, silent support. Begin your report, Velnara said. Hyunwoo took a breath and activated his presentation. The first slide showed the archive chamber in all its crystalline glory. The archive contains 40,000 distinct audio fragments. Each one is a prayer. The room erupted in clicking, humming, and other sounds of alien confusion. Velnara raised one hand for silence. Explain. The Kethran civilization collapsed 800 years ago. We've never understood why. They had stable governments, advanced technology, no external threats. But these prayers tell us what happened. Their gods went silent. Over decades, maybe centuries, their deities stopped answering. And without that spiritual foundation, their entire society crumbled. A reptilian engineer named Thovak hissed softly. This is speculation. Audio fragments could be anything. Historical drama, training exercises, entertainment media. I've analyzed the linguistic patterns, the emotional resonance, the content structure. These match prayer formats from 47 different known species, including humans, including yours, Thovak. The prayers you don't perform anymore but are still in your cultural database. Thovak's scales flushed darker, a sign of embarrassment or anger. My species abandoned such primitive practices 3,000 years ago. And yet you still remember them, Hyun-woo said quietly. Let me show you. He played fragment number 12,406. A Kethran voice filled the room, speaking words that his translation software rendered into Galactic Standard in real-time text. The prayer was simple. A farmer asking for rain, a mother asking for her children's safety, a common person asking for strength to face another day. When it ended, the room was silent. This is the first prayer recorded in the archive, Hyun-woo said. Now listen to one of the last. Fragment 39,790. The voice was hollow, defeated. The translation read, I speak to nothing. I know this now. But I speak anyway because I have always spoken. I ask for nothing because nothing will be given. I am alone. We are all alone. Tomorrow I leave this world. I will not pray again. Jiwon wiped her eyes. Even Daeho looked shaken. But Velnara's expression didn't change. Interesting historical data, the captain said, but ultimately irrelevant to our mission. We're here to recover technology, not document ancient religious practices. With respect, Captain, I disagree. This archive is technology. Not in the way you mean, but it represents something the Kethran valued more than anything else. They kept it powered for 8 centuries. They built it to last. They wanted someone to find it. To what purpose? Hyun-woo hesitated. He had thought about this question for 20 days, lying awake in his bunk, listening to echoes of alien prayers. I think they wanted someone to know they existed, to know they tried, to know they believed in something even when that something abandoned them. A three-eyed being named Kolthar spoke up. Her species had once been deeply religious before embracing pure logic. If these prayers went unanswered, they have no value. A prayer that fails is just noise, is it? Hyun-woo pulled up another file. I want to introduce you to someone. I call her the Mother of the Silver Temple. She appears in 237 separate prayers, always praying for the same thing. Her child was sick with a degenerative neural condition, incurable by Kethran medical standards. He played the first prayer. The mother's voice was steady, faithful. She thanked her gods for her child's life and asked for healing. The second prayer, recorded a month later according to the timestamp, showed cracks in that faith. The third prayer was desperate. The 10th was barely coherent. She prayed for 3 years, Hyun-woo said. 237 times she came to this archive and recorded her prayers. And then she stopped. I found medical records in the station's database. Her child died. Then the prayers failed, Velnara said. They were worthless. Were they? Hyun-woo played the final prayer. The mother's voice was different now, aged by grief.
My child is gone.
You did not save them. You did not answer. But I do not regret praying. When I spoke to you, I was not alone. When I begged for my child's life, I was not powerless. The prayer did not save them. But it saved me for a time. It let me hope. And hope, even false hope, is better than facing the darkness alone. The room fell quiet. Jiwon was crying openly now. Daeho stared at the table. Even some of the alien crew members shifted uncomfortably. I want to translate more of these, Hyun-woo said. Not all 40,000, but a representative sample. I want to create context profiles, understand who these people were, what they hoped for, what they lost. I want to give them voices again. To what end? Velnara asked. But her tone was less sharp now. Because they deserve to be heard. Because we're the only ones who can hear them now. Because we walked into their most sacred space and almost dismissed it as worthless data. Soyeon, the human xenopsychologist, had been quiet until now. She was older than Hyun-woo, with silver streaking her black hair. Captain, I'd like to assist Hyun-woo with this project. From a psychological perspective, these prayers represent an invaluable window into the Kethran collective consciousness. Understanding their spiritual collapse might help us understand other aspects of their society. Velnara's mandibles clicked together rapidly, a sign of deep thought. You have one additional week, no more. And Soyeon, you're reassigned to assist, but I want practical results. Anything that helps us understand why they abandoned valuable infrastructure, why they left technology behind. Anything that might lead to recoverable assets. It wasn't the answer Hyunwoo wanted, but it was enough. For the next 7 days, Hyunwoo and Soyeon worked in tandem. She would listen to the prayers and build psychological profiles, while he handled the linguistic analysis. They discovered patterns in the prayers, themes that repeated across thousands of voices. There were prayers for healing, always the most desperate. Prayers for understanding, often from scholars and priests. Prayers for purpose from those who felt lost. Prayers for forgiveness from those who felt they had failed. And always underlying everything, prayers for connection, for proof they weren't alone in the universe. This one's different, Soyeon said on the 5th day. She played a prayer that sounded almost angry. The speaker challenged their gods, demanded answers, refused to accept silence. This person didn't lose faith. They evolved beyond it. Hyunwoo listened carefully. Fragment 28,903. Recorded during the middle period of the collapse. The speaker is, they're not praying. They're arguing. Read the translation. I do not accept your silence. I do not accept that you have abandoned us. So I choose to believe something else. I believe you never existed. I believe we created you from our need to not be alone. And if that is true, then we have the power to create meaning for ourselves. We don't need gods. We need each other. But they still recorded it here, Soyeon pointed out. In an archive dedicated to prayers. Why? Because even revolution is a kind of prayer, Hyunwoo said quietly. A hope for something better. By the end of the week, they had translated and contextualized 300 prayers. Each one represented a life, a story, a moment of desperate hope or crushing despair. Hyunwoo compiled them into a document that ran 200 pages. He added historical context, cultural notes, psychological analysis. The night before his final presentation, Daeho found him in the observation lounge, staring out at the station. You did good work, Daeho said. I listened to them. That's all. Listened and wrote down what they said. That's more than anyone else would have done. Most species would have cataloged the archive and moved on. Hell, we almost did. Hyunwoo pressed his hand against the cold window. There's something I haven't told anyone yet. Something I figured out last night. What? The last prayer in the archive. Fragment 40,000. It's not a prayer at all. It's a message. To whoever found this place. It says, if you hear these voices, if you understand what they meant to us, then we were not forgotten. Then our hope was not entirely in vain. Then somewhere across time and space, someone cared enough to listen, and that is enough. That is everything. Daeho was quiet for a long time. So what are you going to do? Tomorrow I present the translations to the crew. And then I'm going to figure out how to answer 800 years of prayers. You can't answer prayers, Hyunwoo. You're not a god. Hyunwoo smiled sadly. No, but I'm someone who heard them. And maybe that's all a prayer really needs. Part 2. The listening. The research lab felt too bright after spending hours in the dimness of the station. Hyunwoo rubbed his eyes and looked at the screen again. 3 days of work, and he had barely scratched the surface. The fragments refused to cooperate with standard translation algorithms, slipping through digital analysis like water through fingers. You should rest, Minji said. The AI assistant's voice came from the speakers with perfect clarity but no real warmth. She could process 1,000 languages and identify patterns invisible to organic minds. But she couldn't understand why Hyunwoo kept working 16-hour shifts. Just one more, Hyunwoo muttered. He played fragment number 473. The voice was higher pitched than the others. Younger, perhaps. The Kethrin language flowed and twisted, and this time Hyunwoo caught actual words. Mother Sky. Father Stone. Sickness. Please. His translation software spat out gibberish. The sentence structure was wrong. The grammar didn't match any known Kethrin dialect. But when he closed his eyes and just listened, ignoring the need to translate, he understood. A child. Asking someone something to make the pain stop. Hyunwoo's hand shook as he paused the recording. He thought of his own mother, kneeling beside his hospital bed when he was 8 years old, whispering prayers to Buddha while the machines beeped their rhythm. He remembered her face, tear-streaked and desperate. He remembered not understanding the words, but understanding everything. Minji, ignore standard grammar patterns. Focus on emotional resonance instead. Match these fragments to prayer structures from any known religious database. That is not a recognized analytical method. Do it anyway. The AI processed for 3 seconds, an eternity in digital time. When she spoke again, there was something different in her tone. Not emotion, but perhaps confusion. Correlation found. High probability match to prayer formats across 47 different species. Confidence level 92%. Hyunwoo leaned back in his chair. They are prayers. That conclusion requires additional evidence. The fragments could be ceremonial recitations, historical reenactments, or play fragment 1000. This voice was deeper, weathered. The words came slowly, carefully, as if each one carried weight. Hyunwoo's translation software caught more this time. I have walked the temple steps for 30 years. I have offered the sacred fruits. I have sung the dawn songs. Why do you not answer? My world dies. My people die. Please, please answer. The recording ended in silence. Fragment 1001, Hyunwoo said quietly, a woman's voice, breaking. You promised. You promised you would hear us. The ancient texts say you would hear. But there is only silence. Only silence and death. Fragment 1002, I don't know if you exist anymore. I don't know if you ever did. But I have no one else to speak to. So I speak to you. Hyunwoo played 10 more, 20, 50. The pattern became undeniable. These weren't just prayers. They were the last prayers. The desperate final attempts of a civilization that had put all its faith in gods who never responded. By day 5, Daiho started bringing meals to the lab because Hyunwoo kept forgetting to eat. His friend sat quietly while Hyunwoo worked, offering no judgment, no questions. On the 6th day, Daiho finally spoke. You look terrible. Thanks. I mean it. When's the last time you slept properly? Hyunwoo didn't answer. He was listening to fragment 7312. A father begging for his daughter's life. The words were so raw, so honest that Hyunwoo felt like an intruder. But he kept listening because someone had to. Because these voices had been trapped in crystal for 800 years and someone had to finally hear them. The Kethran civilization collapsed. Hyunwoo said suddenly, We know that. Every colony, every world, all abandoned within a 50-year period. No war, no plague we can identify. They just gave up, packed up and vanished. Daiho set down his coffee. And what if they didn't just give up on their worlds? What if they gave up on everything? Their gods went silent, and without that they had nothing left to hope for. That's dark. That's what these prayers are telling me. Listen. Hyunwoo played a fragment at random. The voice spoke in measured tones, almost resigned. This is my final prayer. Tomorrow I leave for the outer colonies. We will try to start again somewhere else. But I know the truth now. The heavens are empty. We are alone. We have always been alone. Daiho was quiet for a long time. How many of these are like that? All of them. Every single one. By the end, they're not even really praying. They're just saying goodbye. By day 10, Hyunwoo had cataloged 15,000 fragments. He had learned to recognize different speakers, different prayer styles. There were formal prayers from temple priests, desperate prayers from common people, philosophical prayers from scholars questioning the nature of divinity, children's prayers simple and trusting, elders' prayers bitter and betrayed. The Kethran had 6 genders, 3 life stages, and a complex social structure that Hyunwoo was only beginning to understand. But their prayers were universal. They asked for the same things humans asked for: health, safety, understanding, love, purpose, and they received nothing but silence. Why would they build this archive? Hyunwoo asked himself one night. Minji was offline for maintenance, so he was truly alone. Why collect all these prayers in one place? He pulled up the station's original design files. The archive chamber wasn't part of the initial construction. It had been added later, expanded over decades. The Kethran had deliberately created this repository, had ensured it would remain powered even after they left. They wanted someone to find it. Someone to listen. On day 15, Hyunwoo made a breakthrough. He discovered that the prayers weren't stored randomly. They were organized chronologically, creating a timeline of the Kethran's spiritual collapse. The early prayers were full of hope and devotion. The middle ones showed doubt creeping in. The final ones were filled with despair. Fragment 39,998 was one of the last recorded. The voice belonged to someone old, someone tired. They spoke in barely a whisper. I am the last priest of the Temple of the Seven Moons. Tomorrow I seal the archive. Tomorrow I leave this world forever. I do not know who will find this place. Perhaps no one. Perhaps the universe itself will end before these words are heard again. But if someone does find them, if someone listens, please understand. We believed. We believed with everything we had. And still the gods were silent. Tell our story. Remember that we tried. The recording ended, and Hyunwoo sat in the darkness of his lab with tears running down his face. By day 20, Velnara was demanding a report. Hyunwoo prepared his findings with shaking hands. He had listened to 40,000 prayers, 40,000 voices crying out across time. He had heard their hope die. He had witnessed the death of their faith. But he had also found something else. In the prayers, in the careful preservation, in the desperate hope that someone would listen, he had found proof that the Kethrin hadn't truly given up. They had believed that somewhere, sometime, someone would care enough to hear them. Daeho found him sitting in the lab at 300 hours, staring at the completed report. You okay? Hyunwoo looked up. Do you believe in anything, Daeho? Gods? Anything? His friend considered the question. My grandmother used to light incense every Sunday. Said she was praying for us. I never really bought into it, but I don't know. Sometimes I think about her and I hope she was right. The Kethrin prayed for 800 years, maybe longer. They built temples across a dozen worlds. They created complex theologies and rituals, and then their gods went silent and their entire civilization crumbled. That's terrifying. It is. Hyunwoo stood and saved his report. But here's what terrifies me more. These prayers still exist. They're still here, still waiting. And we almost dismissed them as worthless data. We almost flew away without listening. Tomorrow he would present his findings to the crew. Tomorrow he would try to make them understand what he had found. But tonight he returned to the archive one more time. He stood in the chamber full of glowing crystals surrounded by 40,000 voices, and he whispered into the darkness. I heard you. I heard all of you. The crystals pulsed softly, and for a moment Hyunwoo could almost believe they were responding. Part 1. The Discovery. The station floated like a broken dream against the dying star. Hyunwoo pressed his gloved hand against the observation window and watched the ancient structure rotate slowly through the darkness. Metal wings stretched out from a central sphere, each one scarred by centuries of micrometeorite impacts. The star behind it pulsed red and angry, casting everything in the color of old blood. It's bigger than we thought, Daeho said from behind him. His friend's voice crackled slightly through the helmet speaker. The scans show at least 40 levels. Most of them are sealed. Hyunwoo nodded but didn't turn away from the window. He had studied the Kethrin for 6 years, ever since the first ruins were discovered on Kelvar Prime. A species that had reached the stars 1,000 years before humans learned to forge iron. A species that had simply vanished 8 centuries ago, leaving behind empty cities and unanswered questions. Hyunwoo stopped daydreaming. We're docking in 5 minutes. Captain Velnara's voice cut through his thoughts like a blade. The insectoid officer didn't have much patience for what she called philosophical wandering. To her, this was just another survey mission. Catalog the technology, strip anything useful, move on to the next dead civilization. The docking clamp seized the station with a metallic groan that Hyunwoo felt through his boots. The survey team gathered in the airlock, 6 figures in environmental suits. Velnara towered over them all, her forearms checking equipment with mechanical efficiency. Beside Hyunwoo, Daeho was fidgeting with his engineering scanner. Ji-won, their communications specialist, stood quietly near the back, her eyes closed in meditation or prayer. The inner door opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The station's interior was dark and cold. Their helmet lights cut through the blackness, illuminating walls covered in the flowing script of the Kethrin language. Hyunwoo's heart raced as he recognized prayer formations, the same ones he'd seen in the temples on Kelvar Prime. But these were everywhere, covering every surface, carved deep into metal that should have been reserved for technical specifications and safety warnings. Interesting, Velnara muttered. They wasted structural integrity for decoration. It's not decoration, Hyunwoo said quietly. It's scripture. They moved deeper into the station. The corridors branched like arteries, leading down and down toward the core. Most rooms were empty, stripped clean long ago by whoever had abandoned this place, but the writings remained, growing denser the further they went. Daeho stopped suddenly. I'm getting a power signature. Something's still active down there. Velnara's mandibles clicked together in what might have been excitement or irritation. Show me. They descended 3 more levels following the power readings. The air grew colder. Hyunwoo noticed ice crystals forming on the walls, glittering in their lights like tiny stars. And then they found the door. It was massive, 10 meters tall, made of a crystalline material that seemed to glow from within. The Kethrin script here was different, more formal, more desperate. Hyunwoo stepped closer, his fingers tracing the air above the symbols without touching. What does it say? Ji-won asked. She had moved up beside him, her voice gentle. Here rest the voices of the faithful. Hyunwoo translated slowly. Here rest their hopes, their fears, their final words to the silent heavens. Poetic, Velnara said. Can you open it? Daeho was already working on the access panel. Ancient systems flickered to life under his hands, responding to universal mathematical sequences. The door shuttered, then split down the middle, opening like a flower made of diamond. The chamber beyond took Hyunwoo's breath away. It was spherical, perhaps 50 meters in diameter, and every centimeter of its surface was covered in small crystalline cells. Each cell glowed softly with its own internal light, creating a constellation of colors that shifted and pulsed. In the center of the chamber, suspended by nothing visible, floated a control terminal of Kethrin design. Scan everything, Velnara ordered. Her team spread out, but Hyunwoo walked straight to the terminal. The interface was dead, but when he touched it, something responded. Light flowed across the surface, and suddenly the air filled with sound. It was like nothing Hyunwoo had ever heard. Not quite speech, not quite song. The voice rose and fell in patterns that felt ancient and intimate. It spoke in Old Kethrin, a dialect he could barely understand, but the emotion transcended language. This was someone asking for something, someone hoping for something, someone desperate for an answer that never came. The sound faded and another took its place, then another, and another. There are 40,000 discrete data fragments in this archive, Daeho reported, his scanner blinking rapidly. Each one contains complex audio waveforms. Some kind of communication system, maybe? Or historical records, and Velnara suggested. She had moved to examine one of the crystalline cells up close. The Kethrin were known for their oral tradition. This could be their library, but Hyunwoo wasn't listening. He stood at the terminal, his hand still on the interface, and let the voices wash over him. They came faster now, overlapping, creating a chorus of sounds that made his chest tight. He couldn't understand the words, but he understood something deeper. These weren't records. These weren't stories. These were prayers. I need to study these, he said suddenly. All of them. Velnara's laugh was harsh. That would take months. We have 3 weeks before the survey ship moves to the next sector. Then I'll work fast. Why? They're just audio logs from a dead species. Probably religious nonsense, which makes them even less valuable. We should focus on finding technical data. Weapon systems, propulsion technology. Things that matter. Hyunwoo turned to face her, and something in his expression made the captain's mandibles still. With respect, Captain, these do matter. The Kethrin didn't fill a space station with technical manuals. They filled it with these. 40,000 of them. That means something. Ji-won stepped forward, her voice calm. Let him try, Captain. We have the time, and Hyunwoo's linguistic analysis might give us context for whatever else we find here. Cultural understanding helps with technical recovery. Velnara considered this. Her alien features were hard to read, but Hyunwoo had worked with her long enough to recognize calculation. Finally, she clicked her mandibles in agreement. Fine, 3 weeks. But I want regular reports, and if you find anything that references technology, or the reason they abandoned this station, you tell me immediately. Understood. That night, back aboard the survey ship, Hyunwoo couldn't sleep. He lay in his bunk and stared at the ceiling, seeing the glowing crystalline cells in his mind. 40,000 fragments. 40,000 voices crying out across 8 centuries of silence. Somewhere in the darkness, Daeho's voice drifted from the bunk below. You really think they're prayers? Yes. Why would they build a whole station just to store prayers? Hyunwoo was quiet for a long moment. Maybe because prayers were all they had left. He closed his eyes and tried not to hear the echoes of those ancient voices, still calling out to gods that never answered.